Okay, friends, hi. We are continuing now with program number 19 in the Rays and Initiations webinar commentaries for part 2 of the book. As I've said, for part 1, I've already dealt with these in writing, but maybe I'll have another occasion to discuss the matter more informally and conversationally. We have been dealing with the idea that every major ray ashram has a number of subsidiary ashrams, depending on which ashram it is, and that only the first ray ashram has no subsidiary, fully functioning ashrams. Every other ashram has at least one, and maybe more, not all are discussed, subsidiary, fully functioning ashram. The most unfolded is the second ray ashram, which has only one of its subsidiary ashrams in a nascent state, one in which only the nucleus exists, as it is said here. But it will be a long time before the first ray ashram has these subsidiaries, for the reason that few initiates, let's see, how does it say here? It says, yet very little understood, and few initiates can meet the requirement of first ray initiation. There's more to it as well. This is because, as yet, few initiates can meet the requirements of first ray initiation. Initiates with various other rays and subrays that have to be handled by subsidiary ashrams. This is no reflection upon humanity. It is a question of divine timing and expediency, and Shamballa is not yet prepared, this is interesting, for the influx of first ray initiates, and there would be if there were an extensive training program operative for those upon the path of initiation with first ray souls. So ages must pass, it says, before the will aspect will have reached the stage of unfoldment and expression on the physical plane and through the medium of mankind, which will warrant the fusing of 6 first ray fires. Now, of course, they have to exist first before they can be fused. So they have to appear and they have to train their initiates, and then the fusion and absorption into Shamballa will occur. The purest fires, they are, the word pur means fire, and in essence all things are fire, as the treatise on cosmic fire tells us. So the Tibetan goes on here and says that if you will add all the above information as background to what you know about ashramic work today, you will have a more complete picture of evocative and spiritual reality. The great spiritual realities do invoke and are responsible for the evocation of the lower energy centers, that is, centers like humanity. You will know much, for I have told you much, anent the ashrams open today and the requirements for acceptance. And our task, is to draw, we are to draw worthy disciples towards the ashrams. And we are to use, among other things, interestingly, discipleship in the New Age, which has in it so much instruction and basically a great deal of wise advice for those who are on the periphery of the ashram, or Master DK's ashram, at least in various groups. At least they were, and I think their affiliation will be rekindled, re-emphasized in their next incarnation. The Seed Group project, we are told, is a 275-year project. I think going then up to the year 2200, it began around the year 1925. So much happened in 1925, and interestingly enough, a treatise on cosmic fire came out in 1925, though obviously it had to be in process of being written for a long time. Notice how he did actually write a bridging treatise related to the secret doctrine, really the psychological key to the secret doctrine, immediately as he set to work, hoping, I suppose, to attract theosophists who were already well-trained into the new work, and giving them a basis for feeling there was a continuity between what he was writing now in Cosmic Fire and all that they had studied in the secret doctrine. We know that that worked out with various results, some in terms of repudiation of the entire DKAAB work, and some of the broader minded theosophists entering into a state of acceptance while not repudiating at all the secret doctrine and all Blavatsky had done. I mean, why accept less when you can accept more that is of quality? And I suppose, who knows, there may be a similar test coming up when the third installment, starting from 2025 and afterwards, is offered. And will there be those in the Bailey group, maybe it's not so likely, I hope not, who will repudiate the third installment of the secret doctrine, because it may sound, well, the third installment of DK's work anyway, because it seems to sound a different note. There will be those who recognize the sameness of note, of course. So much has been spoken about the ashrams today, and it would be really worthwhile making commentaries on the references to the ashrams. It is essentially the uniqueness of the initiatory process. It is essential that the uniqueness of the initiatory process be discounted. Well, now, what does he mean by that? Down the ages, men have achieved, are achieving, and will achieve, and in a way, initiation is for many, though not necessarily for all in the human family. Some in the human family will choose not to travel this more strenuous path. The only difference is that as the intellect of man develops, the requirements for initiation become more drastic and exacting, and the initiate therefore becomes of a distinctly higher order. And, you know, I suppose if we were to compare those on the path of initiation today to those on that same path millions of years ago, there would be a very definite difference in achievement. The master today is infinitely wiser and more full of love and more occultly reasonable, you know, pure reason we're talking about, than was the master in Atlantean times. I always, you know, because I've made a specialized study of it, not necessarily meaning it's the deepest of study, but at least a specialized study of infinity. Whenever I run to that word infinitely, I realize when it is being used in a literal way and when in a figurative way. Here I think very much a figurative way, trying to demonstrate that today's master is a great deal wiser and more full of love than was possible in Atlantean days. This in itself constitutes a reasonable fact, does it not, my brother? Well, yes, it does, because there's an ongoing progression, is there not, in the development of the human being, and so the spiral is ever mounting upwards, and there are points on the spiral which have a resonance to lower points, but they are still higher than those lower points. Okay, so in considering excuse me, the work carried forward in the ashram as it affects the masters themselves, two ideas automatically emerge. So we're on page 389. The masters are also subject to limitation. This, the neophyte, the early student of this work cannot realize. Look, if the planetary logos is subject to limitation, if the solar logos is subject to limitation, then certainly the master is subject to limitation. Well, even the entire cosmos, considered as a point of precipitation of the no thing, is subject to infinite limitation. Anyway, the masters are also subject to limitation. The general idea of all aspirants is that they represent those who have achieved freedom, have been liberated, and are therefore held by no limiting circumstance whatsoever. Now, obviously, this cannot be true. If we think deeply about it, we realize this is not true, though, speaking relatively, or so far as humanity is concerned. It is a fact that the limitations by which they were held as human beings are no longer present. Yes, because they have mastered the three lower planes completely and have emerged out of the strictly human kingdom and are no longer held by the elemental life. But one achieved freedom only opens the door to another and wider freedom, we might say possible, on ahead. And the ring past knot of our planetary life in itself constitutes a powerful limitation. So I ran into that book by one of the Indian swamis that was titled Easy Travel to Other Planets. I began to wonder what those planets were. I figured they maybe were on the astral plane. Okay, well, if I'm not careful, this is going to disappear. So just allow me a moment and I will take care of the other computer as well. There's nothing like having your whole computer shut down because Microsoft wants to restart it to add various corrections. It could happen at an inopportune time. Okay, so they are not held by the limitations that held them when they were human beings, but one achieved freedom leads to another, and wider freedom on ahead. And the ring past knot of our planetary life itself constitutes a powerful limitation. We are a non-sacred planet, and it's not so easy to be part of the planetary life of other planets in our solar system. Speaking symbolically, somewhere in that great dividing wall of our planetary circumference, the Master must find an exit and discover a door which will permit him to enter the way of higher evolution in its more cosmic stages. Great dividing wall. And the exit, of course, the exits are the paths on the way of higher evolution, and I suppose it's by a very strict attunement with the requirements of those paths and by forming a very focused objective of what the particular path has to achieve, and by committing oneself, wholeheartedly, to treading that path, that an exit can be found. As far as the occult specifics of how to find the exit, of course, we don't know what those will be. This way leads them in awareness and consciousness and experience into that life more abundantly of which the Christ spoke. We might say, it's this life more abundant is found on the way of higher evolution. Although to a degree we can all experience it as Aquarius pours into Shamballa and Shamballa into our lives in the three worlds. The origin and source of this more abundant life is to be found on cosmic levels, and not on the levels of the cosmic physical plane to which humanity and the Masters have hitherto been confined, and even the Masters confined. So is this source the spiritual Pleiades? At least for us, well, obviously the most abundant life comes from the universal logos, which is itself the tiniest point of appearance or of expression of absoluteness. Absoluteness, I sometimes prefer to emphasize the state rather than make of it a noun and a kind of a thing. It's not a thing. So the Masters are subject to limitation. Two ideas are emerging here, and I'm dealing with states of awareness, says the Tibetan, and with experiences and spiritual undertakings which lie outside my own personal realization. And here he does say there is such a thing as personal realization. He does, though he is a master, he refers to himself as having personhood. And of course he He has pure reason. He can reason about these things. He has the intuition. He has the source books which tell of these things. He very well knows they are true, but in terms of direct experience, he may not have that which those who find their point of tension on those higher levels have. But in spite of this truth, just as you, in the position of aspirants and disciples, know much about the hierarchy, its aims, its life, aims, and conditioning rules, so do I, a master of the 5th degree, know much concerning what lies ahead of me. Well, we don't know. Has Master DK, since the writing of this, has he taken the 6th degree? Some speculate that he has, and that now he is a Chohan of some kind along the secondary line, but of this, it would be sheer speculation, and we have no confirmation of it, at least in the books, because at the time he was writing them, and this is some of the very last writing he was doing, he had not yet done this. I can therefore endeavor to make some small part of these essential truths clear to those who can profit by them. Such people will necessarily be initiated disciples, and I assume, presumably not just on the, path of probationary initiation, but at least true initiates of the 3rd degree. I presume this to be the case. The term initiated disciples seems to mean that. I mean, even the Christ is a disciple, and we've talked about the masters as being disciples. So that particular term suggests one who is forever learning and trying to fit himself for ever wider fields of expression, which are more demanding of him than the field of expression in which he is now working. So anyway, just as we apparently know something of hierarchy and talk about it as if we know something, because we trust our sources and maybe our intuition has spoken, so will the master, who is on much firmer ground, speak about that which will lie ahead of him. In true humility, one must know what one is, what one actually has experienced, not just what one is reaching for, but what one has actually experienced. Intimations may come of that which lies ahead, and those intimations may be very stirring, very exciting, but they're different from a continuity of realization of that which the intimation indicates. So the masters are subject to limitation, and this master, can speak of that which lies ahead of him just as we can speak of that which lies ahead of us, and the full experience of those objectives will come later. Years ago, how many years ago? Maybe 24 years earlier than this was written, perhaps, in 1922, when I gave the names of the 7 paths, along one of which a master must go. He must, okay. Initiation Human Solar, it was felt by those for whom I was working that humanity was not ready for the information which I now propose to give. So he's preparing us for an expansion of information, because something, let's just say the Second World War, perhaps, the great suffering of humanity, the condition which was much impressed by very, very strong energies which broke open many old thought forms. Maybe these have made humanity possibly more receptive. I would here remind you that I have ever stated that even the hierarchy does not know exactly, maybe in general perhaps, but not exactly, how humanity will react or what progress they will make within a given time. That's such an important idea, because, it removes us from the idea of the all-knowing master. Maybe even Sanat Kumara does not know. This principle of free will, in a way Syrian in nature, introduces that whole idea of unpredictability. And that's very good because, much is in our own hands. The time equation, in many respects, is in our own hands, and we can draw upon the resources of our inner self and surprise even ourselves regarding what can be done. I'm recalling there was a disciple. He was Alice Bailey's secretary, actually. His name was Victor Fox, RVB, that's what it was. And DK begins his introduction by saying that he had made more progress than DK had expected, and more progress than his soul, i.e. solar angel, had expected. More progress in this particular life. So much is left to us, and the Buddha tells us to rely upon ourselves. I would here remind you that I've ever stated even the hierarchy does not know exactly how humanity will react or what progress they will make within a given time. Since I gave the earlier exoteric information, the world war took place. The forces of hidden evil emerged for a short period and were then routed. And humanity has awakened to truer values and spiritual perception to a totally unexpected extent. Unexpected, not anticipated by the masses. Now, we do have to remember that following the war, and in 1925 or the years leading up to that, the Tibetan did write a great deal about these cosmic paths. He elaborated much that was given in Initiation Human and Solar, and now, in the late 1940s, he begins to extend that elaboration. So, in a way, even more is being given than was given in Cosmic Fire, and what was given in Cosmic Fire was profound. Men have been so aroused by the past agony that never again will they fall asleep. I hope that applies to today's world, as sometimes I feel we or sections of humanity do fall asleep through denial when faced with the reemergence of evil. They may move slowly, but they are, for the first time on a large scale, really thinking and visioning. So we have both the mental and the astral body brought to a higher state of sensitivity and responsiveness. For this reason, it is now possible to give out teaching hitherto regarded as too advanced. There are those alive today who will understand. There are those coming into incarnation during the next 50 years whose feet are already set upon this higher way. And it is for them I write. Well, goodness, is Master DK saying he is writing for arhats whose feet are not even set, whose feet are not yet set on the way of higher evolution, and for masters who are indeed closer to setting their feet upon the way, well, he can't really, it is Chohans who are really setting their feet upon the higher way, but we might say that as an arhat it actually begins. At least one anticipates it. As a master, one definitely anticipates it, and he can be, it seems, even writing for other masters. We have to, although Master DK is undertaking the training for initiates of the first, second, and even the third degree, we cannot forget that some of what he writes may be useful to those of even higher degree. I'm going to disappear for a second as I turn on an additional light. Okay, I don't know if that helped at all. Maybe it didn't. I'm not sure that we can ever have too much light. I think, well, for some sensitive receptors, maybe we can have too much light, but I know that there's a certain point when half of my face is completely illumined and the other half is in the dark, and although I'm on the fourth ray in many respects, I think that's going a little bit too far, so I would prefer to have a more consistent illumination if possible. Okay, there are certain preliminary statements which would be useful here if there is to be any real and true measure of clear thinking and understanding. Their significance will emerge as we study the 7 paths and the 9 initiations, and we almost might say now the 9 paths, 2 of which we cannot yet study, and the 9 initiations. I shall do no more than state them, but you must regard them as basic. Now, you know, at a certain point here, I'm going to interrupt my progress by pointing to the fact that about a year ago, I did treat all these 7 cosmic paths, all the references, at least all the coherent references to these subject areas I gathered together and treated them, and they will be found in the video commentaries that I made on the last part of A Treatise on Cosmic Fire, beginning with page 1194. So that when I came to what was written in Rays and the Initiations, I added what was also written in Initiation Human and Solar, which was often identical with what was written in A Treatise on Cosmic Fire, but then after the material was extracted from Initiation Human and Solar, it was expanded greatly in A Treatise on Cosmic Fire. There's nothing like having an accurate sense of our destiny, monadic destiny, we might call it, of our destination. It really will help to alleviate the tendency towards missteps along the way. Many are the attractions and allurements along the way, but if they are seen as not really leading to what is considered to be the accurate destiny of the monad, then they will be forsworn and eliminated, and we will save ourselves and others much time. Okay, so here are some of the statements that Master DK is offering. Number 1, our 7 planes, the mastery of which is our idealized spiritual goal, because we want to master all the way up to the logoic plane, which the Christ is in process of doing, focused as he is principally on the logoic plane. At least his monad is focused there, I do believe. Are, after all, only the lowest cosmic plane, the cosmic physical plane. And, you know, you've seen the picture before, and this is the great chart on page 344. And here's our cosmic physical plane, but every one of these has that same kind of detail. Could it be but expanded? Now, you know, if Master DK is saying, well, I, Master DK, have not yet been to the cosmic astral plane, he's not going to offer that kind of expansion to us who are struggling here simply to be relatively free of the astral body and take some of the preliminary initiations. We're pretty low down here on the esoteric totem pole, but we can imagine that these various cosmic planes will all be full of detail and will all have not only 7 subdivisions, but 49 subdivisions. And the 49 subdivisions, that's not the end of it. There will be 343 subdivisions. So if you really add all this together, it's sort of like 7 times 343. And how many subplanes would there be in this particular unit that we call the 7 cosmic planes, which itself is probably simply a cosmic or supercosmic physical plane, and on and on. But, you know, we don't want to let the mind run too far ahead speculatively. We have a lot that we have to cover right here and now. So from the cosmic angles, the masters are only beginners. And this is such a, you know, when we start talking about prophets and human avatars as being the last word in Revelation, we are sadly mistaken. We may wish it were so for those that don't want to continue eternally on a great and challenging path ever deeper into the cosmos, but that is how it is, and no amount of claiming, asserting, and fighting against the possibility will achieve the eradication of what we must presume to be a fact. So from the cosmic angle, the masters are only beginners, and they know that, and they have that adjusted sense of proportion, that sense of humility, which helps them understand where they really stand, even though they're, much to their amusement, their disciples may give them a kind of a state of exaltation which is far beyond the truth. And even our deeply desired initiations from the first to the sixth are simply preparatory initiations for those to be taken later on the way of high revolution. And, you know, we would have to say beyond the ninth initiation, beyond the ninth initiation. So that probably our first to nine is just the initiations having to do with the cosmic physical plane, and probably another 9 initiations with the cosmic astral, with the cosmic mental, and so forth, until we reach 63 possible initiations, given the super cosmic physical, etheric physical plane. I mean, it's great to have a wonderful speculative view of all these endless possibilities, but we are the infinite being from a certain perspective, and we are the infinity of infinities from a certain perspective, and all that can ever be achieved has already been achieved forever. I know it sounds preposterous, but we're sort of self-dramatizing our possibilities here. So anyway, our 7 planes are, after all, only the lowest cosmic plane, the cosmic physical. So certainly to expect continuity of revelation is a very reasonable expectation, even though it, what do they say, scares the bejesus out of some people that this should go on and on and on. They want to be able to rest forever, but once we master the harp or have exhausted our interest in 72 virgins, there's more in cosmos that may be of spiritual interest. So this higher way is a sevenfold way, and now a ninefold way, we're told, kind of corresponds with the Pleiades, which have not only the 7 sisters but the 2 parents. The 7 paths form its 7 modes of approach to the one way, and together create it. So the 7 are the one. Okay, the 7 paths are really the one path. These 7 paths, or 9 paths now, are not ray conditioned, and this is something, although as DK has told us, in making the choice, the ray may be taken into consideration, though in making the choice of paths, the monadic ray especially may be taken into consideration. It will be taken into consideration. DK has told us that before, but it's not the ultimately decisive and determining factor. By that I mean that entering one or another of them is not in any way dependent upon the ray which conditioned the master earlier. Well, what about the ray that conditions him now? Because if a planetary logos has a ray, and he's far beyond the master in his development, many Mahamanvantaras beyond a master, well, then there will be obviously a continuing conditioning of the advancing monad. The masters and the still higher initiates, such as the Christ, Chohan of the 7th degree almost, can choose any path which makes its appeal in such a manner that complete rightness is registered in the initiate's consciousness, and he knows he can go no other way. But so the appeal must be made in such a manner that complete rightness is registered, and maybe some choose when complete rightness is not registered. It apparently happened to the Buddha. Maybe some choose a path when complete rightness is not registered. It seems to happen, though not happen so often. The Buddha, at least for our planetary system, was an extreme case of compassion. This is amazing thought that extreme compassion can lead one to choose incorrectly. I think our planetary logos on a much higher turn of the spiral also chose incorrectly when making a certain move in relation to the moon chain, and again it was an intensity of compassion which inclined in that way. I think that those who graduate from our particular planetary scheme do become masters of compassion, especially those who tread the path of Earth's surface and then, as it were, graduate onto the path that the Logos himself is on, the solar Logos himself is on. So anyway, not in any way dependent, though there may be indications coming from the ray. Like DK said, look, many of the those upon the path of magnetic work are fifth ray monads. There is such a thing, after all. That those upon the ray path are largely coming from the first and second ray. That the Mahachohan's department, which would have a lot to producing or educating third ray monads, are choosing the path of planetary logoi. But of course, you see, that particular monadic ray could not be the ultimately limiting ray, because planetary logoi of all rays are required. So somewhere along the way, we apparently will meet a still higher ray and a still higher ray, which will allow us to express rays that we do not presently express as our monad, as a monad. So, you know, there may be inclinations, but ultimately those capable of expressing all the rays would have to be found on the path of the planetary logoi, the third path. Okay, and number 3, these are things DK is saying, and certain preliminary statements. So why don't I, you know, of course, just when we build up the preliminary statements, we have to say, okay, and I covered this before. So, okay, that's just what will have to happen. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger because that's the way. So there are certain preliminary statements which would be useful here. So he's making them. Our 7 planes are the cosmic physical plane. The higher way is sevenfold. And number 3, at the 6th initiation called the initiation of decision, and I would say therefore ruled by Libra, and he tells us ruled by the third ray, which comes strongly through Libra. So it's called the initiation of decision. The initiate makes his final choice as to the way that he will go, and from that decision there is no turning back. But I want to say, though there may be transference. Well, we're told, you know, that the Christ is on the ray path at the moment, but wherever else he may be inclined to go, or wherever else his great spiritual adventure may take him, he will eventually end up on the path to Sirius. So there can be transference, and so many, well, all of those who are on the path of Earth service have to transfer to another path, and the Buddha himself will be transferring to another path. So although there's no turning back, there may be another decision along the way, along this path of cosmic destiny, which I believe will ultimately lead to the Pleiades. I think my friend of old, Stephen Pugh, used to emphasize that a great deal, and I think he was correct in that emphasis. You know, a number of us have been sort of cosmological ray theorists here, and we speculate and we create our structures of thought, hoping there is some merit in them, and maybe there is, but ultimately the day will come when we will authoritatively know how much merit was in these speculations. Then going on, three things will necessarily color any decision the initiate may make. So you see his ray, which still determines him, and I'm going to presume it's going to be his monadic ray, because I think the apotheosis of the major triadal ray, i.e., well, should I call it the major triadal ray? Let's just call it the triadal ray, which is really his soul ray, comes to its peak in mastership. And then from that time on, the monadic ray is going to be ever more influential, even as it has been from the third degree. But from that point, we take the soul ray, we call it soul ray, triadal ray, we take it to its height. We take it as far as it can go, and then we have no choice but to develop upon the monadic ray. Which monadic ray? I often say, is it the first of the monadic rays, which is definitely found upon the monadic plane? Or is it a still higher ray of the monad, which may be related, I think, to the three persons of the logoic trinity, and therefore necessarily be either ray 1, 2, or 3. So three things will necessarily color any decision: his ray, which still determines him; his past activities, as they may fit him for specialized work, plus a sense of freedom hitherto unrealized. And that is very interesting. So there's probably some degree of experimentation here if a complete freedom comes over him. Uranus, the planet of experimentation, the planet of freedom, and also the planet of the logoic plane, from which we can assume, which will be his, I suppose, next objective after he leaves the monadic plane, following the decision. Interesting that the Christ, even now, as a seventh degree initiate, becoming, and the Buddha, well, they are on a path. Of course, it's the path of earth service, but they have to register their choice with Sanat Kumara when they make the decision for the path of earth service. And I think, Sanat Kumara is retaining quite a few of the Chohans now because things are so dire upon our planet, but when he does retain them, they make their decision, they put their decision in, as it were, where they will travel following this unusual emphasis upon the path of earth service at this time. So, the Chohans of the sixth degree who are on the path of earth service, usually, DK tells us, they're going to fight their way onto the path of the solar logos, the path the logos himself is on. But maybe there are other possibilities too. So what will color his decision? Well, even though it's not determined, his decision is not determined by his ray, it will be a coloring factor. His past activities will be involved here because he may have learned something in the past which will really fit him for future work, plus a sense of freedom. A sense of freedom hitherto unrealized. Is it the law of freedom that is part of the Syrian expression? Is it? I believe freedom is there, the law of freedom, the law of karma. The two are closely interrelated. The decision might be regarded as the first gesture of the advancing master towards liberation from all ray limitations. And this is interesting, from the point of view of a human being. Yes, there's a liberation from all ray limitations, and yet, I always have to say the words "and yet," a planetary logos is not yet free from all ray limitations, but these are rays as considered on the truly cosmic level. Same for solar logos and so forth. they have their rays, and every ray is a quality, and every quality is a limitation when compared with the absolute or the complete sevenfold synthesis. You kind of wonder how you can add 9 colors together, I mean, is there like infrared and ultraviolet? Is that how we would do that, making the 9? It's harder to do in music than it is in color. Anyway, the first step towards advancing of the advancing master towards limitation from all ray limitations as they apply to the human monad, as let's make that, they apply to the human monad. Right, and as he moves forward on the higher way, he will find himself, as a result of the new training and field of experience, able to work on any ray. And that's amazing. It doesn't mean he won't have ray limitations. I remember the place when I was out for a jog 20 years ago. I said, boy, longer than that, really. Longer than that, 25 years ago, carrying what was then, good technology, the so-called Walkman, a little bit heavy, listening to this book, and I just remember where I was. It stopped me in my tracks. I know exactly where I was when I listened to this idea that the master could have liberation from all ray limitations and the ability to work on any ray as those rays would affect a human monad. Now, maybe eventually the planetary logos would achieve freedom from all ray limitations as they apply to planetary logo and have the ability to work on all rays as they would apply to the planetary logoic monad, and on with solar logo and so forth. In other words, it doesn't mean that when you progress onward towards ever higher types of group consciousness and group demonstration that you will not have ray limitations on that level, but you will have overcome ray limitations on previous levels. So at least on the monadic level, the ability to work on any ray, in terms of what we have called the human monad, what has demonstrated as the human monad, you will have the ability to work on any ray. And this has not been the case hitherto, even though this leads to that kind of cosmic ray limitation eventually, which sees a particular planetary logos, or even, one who's on the ray path having to focus on a particular ray. It will lead to limitations in a higher context. Okay, going on. These are points DK wants to make, and why does he want to make them? Certain preliminary statements which would be useful. They relate to the 7 paths and the 9 initiations, and also to the 9 paths eventually. The 5th initiation is usually called that of the resurrection by the Orthodox Christian, but this is not its real name. Okay, the real resurrection. Now, DK actually did refer to it as the resurrection a bit earlier, but he wanted, to make a bridge there. So there is the nominal resurrection, and then the actual resurrection, which I think resurrects onto the logoic plane, really. The real name for the 5th initiation is the initiation of revelation. And here's the reason for it. And that's a reason I oftentimes forget, but here it is. Because the initiate gains his first vision of the door through which he must pass on the 7 paths. Maybe, maybe his particular door. He glimpses it, and that is all. But between that initiation and the next, in which he must perforce make his decision, and it can be rather lengthy time, actually, maybe, resulting in 1,000 or 2 years, he comes to understand the nature of the energy which each path expresses and which will eventually evoke from him a decisive activity. Well, maybe the door relates to all the 7 paths, you know, to all the 7 paths, and the learning is about all 7 paths, making a definitive choice possible. So probably it is the initiate of the 5th degree who sees the paths in a new way, and in such understanding depth that he knows which he has to travel. Some Master DK has obviously seen this, and he's conveying to us something of what he sees, or at least what the old commentary advises regarding these paths. So the door leads to all the 7 paths, perhaps. That would be more probable, I think. The door, here referenced, leads to all the 7 paths. So he glimpses that door, but he can see beyond the door during the period between the 5th and 6th initiations, and he maybe studies these paths. You know, the decision used to be made at the 5th degree, so one wonders when he would have seen the various paths if at the 5th degree he had to make that decision. But everything continues to spiral upwards, and the demands are greater, and one has to reach a higher point before that decision is possible. That's how it is today. 6. By passing through the 2nd great door of initiation, and I presume that's the door to the way, the door to the way of higher evolution, the initiate begins to learn the significance and attractive potency of the central spiritual sun to which all paths eventually lead. And the theory here is that this central spiritual sun is the constellation of the Pleiades. Now there are many Pleiades, and I think it does represent the 1,000-petaled lotus in the one about whom, in our local one about whom naught may be said. So all paths lead to the Pleiades, and sometimes, you know, when you look at the Pleiades at night, you just get the feeling of why this should be so. It's the central jewel box that appears to be pretty much sevenfold from our perspective, and no matter where our destiny may take us, along the way, it leads thither, we might say. The 5th and 6th initiations are to the master what the 1st and 2nd are to the disciple. Simply initiations of the threshold, and not true initiations from the cosmic angle. You know, it's the 7th initiation then must be considered the 1st. The 7th initiation, how about, let me spell that, is the Syrian transfiguration. And that's what the Christ has achieved. He is a true initiate with respect to the star Sirius, which doesn't necessarily mean that all who achieve the 7th degree will be treading the path to Sirius, but it's sort of the Syrian system. The 5th initiation is the transfiguration for the solar initiate, and the 3rd planetary initiation is the transfiguration for the planetary initiate. The first true initiation upon the higher way is called the initiation of resurrection, and it has no reference to the 5th initiation, and he's implying that this is the 7th initiation, right? So this is the 7th initiation. So we all go through our periods of probation and testing, and the 6th is related to the 1st. The 5th is related to the 1st. the sixth to the second, and the seventh to the third. And that makes sense. Now, you kind of wonder if this is the transfiguration from the perspective of the Syrian logos. Is it also the first initiation in terms of a cosmic logos, or maybe a one about whom naught may be said? I do differentiate between the cosmic logos in which our solar system is a heart center, and thus a cosmic logos in which the chakras are solar logoi, and the one about whom naught may be said in which the chakras are constellations. Number 8, the decision made by the master enables him to take the required training to enter his chosen path, and it's going to take training, and it's going to be on other planets too before leaving the solar system. At least I believe so. And this training is taken entirely upon cosmic etheric levels, which of course would not limit it being on other planets. The 4 highest subplanes of the cosmic physical plane, the Buddhic, Atmic, Monadic, and Logoic planes. So a preliminary period of training is necessitated before journeying off the cosmic physical plane. And as I said before, Venus and Jupiter are 2 of those training positions. There are probably a number of other planets, not so specified, which are involved in training to reach certain constellations on certain paths. Of these planes, the spiritual and the divine will. So spiritual will, on the Atmic plane, and divine will on the Monadic and Logoic plane is developed and brought into use. There are aspects of that undefinable purpose. These are aspects of that undefinable purpose to which we will simply give the name, the will of God. And notice here, this is very important, how purpose and will in this context and will in this context are considered equivalent. Intelligence of love and love have been fully unfolded in the master, but the will is embryonic will from the standpoint of those, capital T, responsible for the training of the master and the higher initiate. Such as the lives within Shamballa. It is sorry, excuse me. Yes, sorry for that little coughing spell there. When you do a lot of talking, it can happen. So the spiritual will and divine will are both developed. Spiritual will, especially on the Atmic plane, and divine will, as I have suggested, more on the Monadic plane and Logoic planes. And I suppose it continues to be developed along the path. That is the divine will. Usually the Monadic will is considered divine will, but the will of still greater monads is still more divine. These are aspects of that undefinable purpose, to which we simply name the will of God and which God and which purpose. Intelligence and love have been fully unfolded in the master, but the will is embryonic still. And if in the master the will is embryonic still, then what kind of will are we talking about with respect to ourselves? From the standpoint of those responsible for training the master and the higher initiate, it is only by means of the divine will that the master begins to free himself from ray limitations, which essentially means how about that? He can work on any ray, at least within the present context. I'm not sure that he can work on every cosmic ray, as it were. He cannot work cosmically yet. Okay, now we come to number 10 in this series of statements, which the Tibetan says is necessary to understand if the place of the cosmic paths is to be known, the true nature of them. I would, he says, remind you of an earlier statement that the hierarchy reacts or responds to the energies and influences coming from the cosmic astral plane. Okay, and Shambhala from the cosmic mental, right? From that level of spiritual life, true divine love pours in, and this despite the fact that the home of the true Black Lodge from the cosmic perspective is also the cosmic astral plane. Shambhala reacts to the cosmic mental plane, and of course we understand that the Buddha's particular connection is with the cosmic mental plane, and that the cosmic touch that he experienced was from the cosmic mental plane, and this tells us something of his shambolic nature, Okay. And therefore to the nature and purposes of the mind of God, let's just say purpose is as far as our planetary logos is concerned, emanates from the cosmic mental plane. Now, the mind of God. But there's more to it. The expression of that which overshadows Sanat Kumara is similar to the soul overshadowing the incarnated spiritual man. Now, the word that is entirely capitalized, so perhaps PRH, yes, we do not mean the planetary logos per se as a being which emanated Sanat Kumara, but perhaps we mean a cosmic logos. Of course, from another perspective, from another and lower perspective, the solar logos overshadows Sanat Kumara. Anyway, DK connected our planetary logos with the one about whom naught may be said. We still have to establish, does our planetary logos have a special connection with the Pleiades? It does with at least one of the Pleiades, and maybe the name of that particular Pleiad is Maya, or the veiled one. So, if you will bear all these facts in mind, some light may break through, and in any case, when the student or disciple returns to incarnation, this imparted knowledge, stored in the soul's content, will then be usefully available. Now, this is a big hint, a strong hint as to the value of our study, stored in the permanent atoms, which are inherent in the egoic lotus itself. Maybe this knowledge is worked upon during incarnations and is of greater value after that, perhaps. All right, so there are 10 points there. Any others? No, I don't think so. 10 points. I would, is it worth a quick review of these 10? 10 factors to keep in mind. Our 7 planes belong to the cosmic physical plane. The higher way is sevenfold. The final choice is made at the initiation of decision, the 6th. 3 things will color that decision: the ray, past activities, and then a factor which is inscrutable. It's unconditioned freedom itself. And yet there is only one correct choice. It's as if it's a test of recognition. The initiation of revelation is the true name of the 5th initiation, because the first vision of the door leading to the seven cosmic paths is granted there. That is what the revelation is. I've sometimes, it's a solar initiation, the third solar and the first Syrian. The initiate learns the meaning of the central spiritual sun by passing through the second great door of initiation, not just the second door, but the second great door. The fifth and sixth initiations are initiations of the threshold in the Syrian sense. The decision made by the master enables him to take the required training to enter his chosen path, and this training, the training to enter the chosen path, is given upon cosmic etheric levels. One may make that decision, but one is not necessarily transported onto a cosmic path, onto the cosmic astral plane immediately, but upon the cosmic etheric levels, training is given. On these higher planes, the spiritual and divine will is developed, what we call the will of God for the master still embryonic. And finally, the masters respond to the cosmic astral plane and Shamballa to the cosmic mental plane. Sanat Kumara, the mind of God, is an expression of that which overshadows Sanat Kumara. Well, certainly the solar logos does, but there are other factors involved here. One of them may be a cosmic logos, which I call, a lower order, one about whom none may be said, and the other may even be the Pleiades, the greater, level 2, I call it, one about whom not may be said. Of course, these levels of ones about whom not may be said do continue on, and on the chart on page 334 of Cosmic Fire, we see so many of these ones of whom we can say nothing. Even the galactic logos far beyond that chart is a one about whom not may be said. The ultimate one about whom not may be said, and really nothing may be said that is unequivocally true, is the absolute. So some light may break in, and in our next incarnation, that's quite an interesting hint. This knowledge will then be usefully available. All right, so new subject now. I would like to enlarge somewhat on an earlier remark. I stated that the 7 ashrams are proving grounds for all masters confronted with the 6th initiation of decision. What will we mean by that? This constitutes part of the problem facing the masters who are thus to move forward. It is particularly crucial for those who have chosen the first path, or have been indicated, who have had indicated to them by Sanat Kumara that they should choose the first path. And it is particularly crucial for those who have chosen the first path, the path of earth service, and for all in preparation for the 6th initiation. The ashrams are proving grounds. I guess the abilities that have been attained are worked out through these ashrams. Okay, so what have we? The process of changing for a final conditioning decision in line, consciously realized with divine purpose and entailing responsiveness to Shambhala, as any 6th degree initiate can register it, is a major undertaking. So, changing for a final conditioning decision. It is related to the development of understanding the will and concerns the spirit or life aspect. Remember that in some places, will and purpose have been conceived as equivalent. So this process of changing for a final conditioning decision, okay, in line it consciously realized with divine purpose, not just in line, but consciously realized as being in line with divine purpose, and entailing responsiveness to Shambhala. And this divine purpose, it must be a purpose, it has to be a purpose of much greater being. This purpose has to be purpose of a very great being, because the 7 cosmic paths, the 7 sacred planets, seven cosmic paths. All right, just allow me a moment, and I'm going to make that. There it is, and it's in capitals, and that's why I wasn't getting it. Very case sensitive. The 7 cosmic paths relate even to cosmic logoi. Cosmic logoi. Okay. CSLGS. And there is the necessity, CSLGS. CSLGS. Okay, cosmic logoi. I thought I had that one, but not really. Okay, and relate even to cosmic logoi, and not simply because our Earth itself, our planetary logos itself, is on one of the cosmic paths, and so is the solar logos. And I would not be surprised if, well, every entity is on its own, so to speak, antichronic path back to the center. So anyway, it is entailing responsiveness to Shambhala, and it's a major undertaking. Responsiveness to Shambhala at first. And then responsiveness to much, responsiveness eventually to much greater and greater sources. It is related to the development of understanding of the will, about which DK persistently tells us we know nothing, and even the master, we have been told, understands very little of the will, even though love and intelligence are his. In the cosmic sense, he does not understand yet. Understanding the will, it concerns the spiritual life aspect. It involves an increasing revelation of the purpose and the fixed intention of the planetary logos, and we can say, yes. But even more than that, it has relation to extraplanetary sources and energies. So that involves also relation to the planetary training grounds and to those cosmic conditions which are responsible for the presence of Sanat Kumara on Earth. That's a very interesting idea. And, why would this be? Does this involve the Great Bear, the stars of which are prototypes to our various planetary logoi? Is that possible? So what was it that made our planetary logos emanate himself as Sanat Kumara into the Venus chain and into our chain? What particular being was behind this type of emanation? Maybe the star Sirius was there, maybe some sort of source corresponding to the 4th chain. Is that possible? Well, we could speculate about that, but there would be no confirmation. Somehow, under the law of correspondences, we might be able to find extra planetary, and will we mean also extra systemic cosmic conditions, and those are extra-systemic. Now, it might not only be sources, it might be conditions within our local cosmos that made this emanation of Sanat Kumara necessary. Because it certainly was a choice. Maybe it's a choice that has to do with a kind of fourth initiation, fourth lesser initiation of our solar logos, which is corresponding. Think of the fourth path, think of Sirius, although Sanat Kumara is not technically speaking on the Sirian line, he does wield the initiatory energies of Sirius. So anyway, let's just, without going too far, say that there are cosmic extra-systemic sources and their conditions which are responsible for the presence of Sanat Kumara on Earth. What great source does he represent? And we might, ask that as a question. What great source does Sanat Kumara represent? And is it a cosmic source? Of what, well, it's like asking in a way, what great source does our planetary logos represent? And I think there we could discuss the rishis of the Great Bear. There are only 7 rishis, and there are a number more planetary logoi, but perhaps each rishi has a connection with more than one planetary logos. It might be possible both Mars and the Earth are non-sacred planets, but Saturn is sacred, and, could the rishi Alioth, in the 3rd position of the handle of the Great Bear, represent not only Saturn with its 3rd ray monad, but Earth and Mars as well. Or when I say represent, I mean be the higher cosmic archetype of both Mars and Earth. Anyway, that's the speculation. We know the sacred planets, each one of them, has a connection to the Great Bear and its 7 rishis. So, major undertaking. It is related to the development of understanding of the will. Okay. It involves an increasing revelation of the purpose and fixed intention of our planetary logos through Shamballa and Sanat Kumara. But even more than that, it has relation to extraplanetary sources and energies, because upon the cosmic ethers, once leaving our planet, there will be training from what particular sources and what particular cosmic sources and constellations will be the destination. So this is a little bit complicated. It is will which has brought him here, and the unfoldment of the will nature of the masters and still higher initiates admits them into his inner deliberations by means of the highest form of telepathic rapport or impression found upon this planet. They receive from Sanat Kumara a type of impression of which spiritual telepathy on the highest level of our higher mental plane is simply a low correspondence. This impression is, however, made possible by the development of the intuition and has no relation to the mind nature. Remember, where do we find the true intuition? And maybe there are higher versions of it. True intuition is found on the 4th subplane of the Buddhic plane. And probably, monadically, there are higher correspondences to it. Maybe on the 4th subplane of the monadic plane, something of that nature. Well, let me read this again because just for continuity. The ashrams are the proving grounds for those masters confronted with the 6th initiation of decision. This constitutes part of the problem. only part, facing the masters who are thus to move forward. It is particularly crucial for those who have chosen the first path, the path of earth service, and for all in preparation for the sixth initiation. Of course, on earth service path, they're going to work in association with Shamballa and with Sanat Kumara. This process of changing for a final conditioning decision, if the masters can have final decisions, I suppose we on our own lower level can as well. Changing for a final conditioning decision in line, consciously realized with divine purpose, and entailing responsiveness to Shamballa is a major undertaking. So this tells us lots of work between the fifth initiation and the sixth initiation. Responsiveness, right. It is related to the development of understanding of the will, something much greater than we know, and the Christ also sought with all his might to understand the will of Shamballa as it was delivered to him in the Garden of Gethsemane. It is related to the development of understanding the will and concerns the spirit or life aspect, that is, the monadic aspect. It involves an increasing revelation of the purpose and the fixed intention of the planetary logos, so between the fifth and the sixth initiation, and especially for those choosing the path of earth service. But even more than that, it has relation to extraplanetary sources, I suppose training grounds, and energies, and to those cosmic conditions which are responsible for the presence of Sanat Kumara on Earth. Now, notice he didn't say sources, so there's something here about the interplay of sources on a cosmic level. And could we be talking about initiation of our solar logos from Sirius, something of that nature, which are responsible for the presence of Sanat Kumara on Earth. Of course, it seems that Sanat Kumara is an emanation of our planetary logos. It seems that. It is will which has brought him here, the will of our planetary logos, presumably, as it responds to still greater wills and unfolding conditions within the cosmic environment, and the unfoldment of the will nature of the masters and still higher initiates, that is Chohans, admits them to his, i.e. Sanat Kumara's, inner deliberations, by means of which the highest form of telepathic rapport or impression may be found upon our planet. Yes, this impression is, however, made possible by the development of the intuition, etc., and it's not about thinking, it's not about the mind in that sense. This training in decision is given by forcing the master to make basic decisions within his ashram, which affect world work and involving all within the ashram. Okay, so a forcing ground, a proving ground through the forcing of decision. If you hear a little hammering in the background, it's we're doing a lot of reconstruction in the place where I am staying, and so an occasional volcanian impact against the wall. I hope you can live with that. Okay. This training in decision, because, you know, decision is final. It's very first-rate thing, very Saturnian. Saturnian first-ray impulse is given by forcing the master to make basic decisions within his ashram, and it will affect world work and involve all within his ashram. So these are, let's see, determining decisions. Forced, determining decisions, all must move on, and he, as the director of an ashram, must learn to make these decisions, and, you know, some of these decisions might not be as good as otherwise they might, but nevertheless he is forced. It is given by his admission to the conclave of masters meeting every 7 years. Now, you know, this is interesting because it corresponds with other 7-ray cycles. Other 7-ray cycles. There are 7-ray cycles. There are 9-ray cycles. And interesting, I didn't realize before this that the masters are meeting every 7 years. Maybe, let's see if we look at this and just try to 7-year cycle, and maybe, okay, I differ somewhat in the periods concerned by such occult teachers as Steiner, for though the 7-year cycles have their place, the 10-year cycles of development, 7 of learning and 3 of application. That could be a good model for an esoteric school as well. I'm beginning to realize 3 years of application, so to speak, one's internship. And let's see, I'll try one more time. 7-year cycles. Maybe there are 2. And here, well, this is from esoteric psychology, and it's not talking about that, but let's just say, let's try this one. Every 7 years. There are 6 of those. So the student is subjected to analysis every 7 years, and there are corrections to the sheets of symbols, changed and corrected every 7 years, and this is interesting. Okay. The record of any group is reviewed every 7 years. Disciples in the groups of the masters, not all, are encouraged every 7 years to do this. And what are they doing? Okay, the gain of path, month, and year. Okay, it's an assessment again. Okay, what else? Okay. Well, here we go. This is the new group of world servers cycle, particularly. Every 7 years. Capricornian influence every 7 years since 1942. This week of group impact occurring every 7 years will run from December 21st through December 28th. And if this time should at any time fall at the period of the full moon, the opportunity will be most significant. Okay, and there's 7 years again. Some lives change their rhythm and mode every 7 years. So basically what we're talking about, the cycle of the new group of world servers, and do these new group of world servers meetings correspond with meetings or conclaves of the masters of the wisdom? Maybe they do. It would seem propitious that they would, I would think. Okay. At that conclave, they make decisions which concern all forms of life in all kingdoms in the 3 worlds and their evolutionary progress. Well, is this the 7-year new group of world servers gathering? Let's see further what we find out. It is put to the test in group form when the entire hierarchy meets at the Centennial Conference, and at that time decides what form of crisis on what level of consciousness and involving what group of lives must be implemented and presented to humanity, though other kingdoms of nature will necessarily be implicated. So this is very important because at the conclave, a crisis is going to be presented as a result. So crises are presented as the result of decisions every 49 years, and also as a result of the great hierarchical conclave. Now, it seems that the decisions at the 7-year conclaves are evaluated at the great conclave. And one of these is coming, and many are the disciples today who are looking forward to the conclave of 2025. I know at least one group that titles itself in that way, and I'm sure it will become a great orienting point for many of us, just the way the year of the Shamballa impact in the year 2000 was a great orienting point. The reason for this is that the meeting of such a planned crisis will hasten certain realizations. So what can we say here in a way, I'll do it differently. The presentation of crisis is the presentation of opportunity. Forget not that humanity grows through the presentation of moments of crisis, tension, emergence. These moments of crisis, based on past karma, that is simply by the condition of what is, conditioned by the point of evolution already achieved, and also on the presence in the three worlds of certain appropriate ray forces, are brought to the point of precipitation by united decision in the conclave of the masters. So it appears at that conclave they make decisions which will concern all the forms of life, but at the great conclave, a great crisis is presented. Well, at the last conclave, it appeared in 1925, a major decision for a hierarchical refocusing on the Buddhic plane was instituted. At least I believe that is the case. The 1925 conclave gave us that possibility, and may have led to a continuance or a precipitation of a still greater phase of the war, which was begun in 1914, but which was not really resolved with the armistice of 1918, which is why the Tibetan refers to it as one great war from 1914 to 1945. So humanity grows through the presentation of crisis, and the masters, I suppose, present smaller crises at their 7-year conclaves, or conditions that affect their ashram at least, and a great crisis is presented to all of humanity at the great conclave. Now, what will it be in 2025? If all goes well, there will, in all probability, be introduced the plans which relate to the first phases of the true externalization of the hierarchy. Right now, we're in the era of the forerunner, the group forerunner, the new group of world servers, and we are forerunning, as it were, in preparation for the coming of a group Christ. The group Christ is the externalization of the masters themselves, followed by the true and great director of hierarchy, coordinator of hierarchy, the Christ. These decisions do not affect man's free will, for hierarchy does nothing to condition man's approach to the crises, and occultly speaking, their attitude is deliberately turned to other things during the period of man's decision. I guess this lets us know how very responsible we are. I guess the Syrian law of freedom cannot be infringed, and it is a law which must be applied to our solar system, because Sirius is one of the great initiators of our solar logos. So a decision is made, a crisis will be presented, but how will man respond to this crisis? Man's strength, the strength of the human will, is promoted by leaving it untouched, although I suppose incentive to make the correct decision is often given by hierarchy as they try to teach humanity what is correct. But interesting, their attitude is deliberately turned to other things during the period of man's decision. Well, you wonder in 1925, what was the period of man's decision? And it did lead to the precipitation of the Second World War. It's quite an amazing decision. I guess, we're having a great symbolic diamond hammered up on the wall. It's made of wood, but the shape is right. Okay. Their attitude is deliberately turned to other things during the period of man's decision. Thus, the potency of their thinking does not affect the human mind. Once the precipitation of the crisis is complete and humanity has begun to take action of some kind, then the full attention of the masters working through the ashrams is committed to the giving of full assistance to all those who are seeking to guide humanity along correct lines, a relative few among the countless millions of those who are ignorant of the ignorant. So this is, let's just say, part of the cultivation of humanity's will is to leave that will untouched, uninfluenced during the period of decision. I imagine on a higher turn of the spiral, although it is known to still higher sources what the correct choice for any Chohan would be. You see, this is it. I'm the Aries type, and even though the wall, there's pounding going on the wall, I still have to keep forging ahead. So I hope it's not too disturbing to you. So those greater sources know what the master's decision should be, but they do not interfere or intervene in any way, leaving a complete freedom of choice, a great freedom. His ray, his past experience, these are conditioning factors, but so is a complete freedom which is undisturbed by higher sources which may know the correct choice. It's not like as he begins to make a decision, Sanat Kumara comes in and says, that's not the right decision. It's the will of the deciding master is trained not only in the ashram, but as he makes that decision and has to live with its consequences, though later, as I said, transference is possible. While these centennial conclaves are being held at the close of the first 25 years of every century, the Lord of the world and the members of his council watch the process of decision in order to see how far the will of the hierarchy conforms to that aspect of the divine will which should be expressed in the three worlds as a result of their decision. Now let me review that. Okay. While these centennial conclaves are being held at the close of the first 25 years of every century, the Lord of the world, with the members of his council, the Buddhas of activity, and so forth, and others, watch the process of decision in order to see how far the will of the hierarchy conforms to that aspect of the divine will which should be expressed in the three worlds as the result of their decision. There are two types of decisions that are going on here. One is the decision of humanity as it is being presented with crisis. Okay, here it is. At that time, the hierarchy meets in one of its centennial conferences and decides what form of crisis, on what level of consciousness, and involving what groups of lives must be implemented and presented to humanity through though other kingdoms of nature will definitely be involved. Okay, so I want to make that a little bigger too. All right, and now one more time. The Lord of the world with the members of his council watch the process of decision in order to see how far the will of the hierarchy conforms to that aspect of the divine will, which should be expressed in the three worlds as a result of their decision. So there are decisions above and decisions below, and the correspondence of the two is noted by the council chamber of Shamballa. Now, it's not, these periods of, let's say, 1925, 2025, 2125, and so forth, are not necessarily the periods when the great decision every 49 years is being rendered. For instance, 1903 was one such period, 1952, 2001, and we're going to have, I think, a very important one in the year 2050. It will be the center of the century. But notice that none of those decisions of the Chohans, which also present an enterprise to humanity, which will be felt in the nature of crisis, notice that none of those great decision periods fell in the year, in the first quarter of the century. I mean, exactly at the mark that marked the first quarter, that is the 25 year. So how will humanity respond? How is humanity responding? And there is no coercion offered. No coercion offered. But I imagine in the decision about what sort of crisis to present, humanity's present condition, the rays available, let's just say the karmic situation is well noted, so that a crisis which is totally overwhelming and impossible to meet in any effective way is not presented. They watch also, that is the council does, those particular masters who should in a short time be ready for the sixth initiation. And what do we mean in a short time? At the next period of decision, perhaps? At the next period of decision, perhaps, who should in a short time be ready for the great decision, in order to see how much of that divine will they register, and what is the nature and quality of their use of it. So we have from the council the divine will coming forth. So what will humanity do with the crisis presented in the conclave, and what will hierarchy do as it responds to the divine will, and I suppose through the members of those about to take the initiation of decision and who are verging upon complete Chohanship and monadship, we might say, more of the divine will is likely to pour. So they watch also those particular masters who should in a short time be ready for the sixth initiation, in order to see how much of that divine will they register and what is the nature and quality of their use of it. Now they also will use it together at the time of the great decision, because more than one initiate takes the great decision in any particular year of decision. Okay, so Shamballa is watchful because the process of decision is going on a number of different levels. Humanity has its own decision in terms of the crisis that is presented to it by the great hierarchical conclave, and within the ranks of hierarchy, there are decisions about how to conform to the divine will, and especially among those who will shortly be Chohans. They will respond individually, of course, and they will have to have a project that they will present, an act, a gift to humanity, probably in the form of some impulse, which is meant to elevate humanity. Remember, the sixth degree is the degree of ascension. So they are ascending, and with their ascension will come the opportunity to elevate humanity, and no doubt will be experienced as a crisis. You can only imagine what would happen if if the year of decision, I probably could figure out when that was going to be or when it was. Maybe before this time it has not so much existed, so it would be still quite a while, maybe something like, where are we? It's the year 2000, and we would have to go back 75, which would be like 37. So, I mean, it could still be a few 4,000 years ahead or so, when the year of decision corresponded to the centennial conclave, if such a rhythm is continued in hierarchy and in relation to Shamballa. Okay, by recording that quality, to see how much of the divine will they register and what is the nature and quality of their use of it, by recording that quality, the council at Shamballa is able to determine with great accuracy which of the seven paths a certain initiate will choose. It almost seems fated here. Now, is it necessarily the right path? If they correspond or respond to the divine will as it is, and that's perhaps a much larger thing than what they have worked out within themselves in terms of how to serve humanity, because we're told that the Christ had his own plans about how to serve and was in a way arrested by the realization of the divine will as presented to him by Sanat Kumara. So that is one type of presentation, and it can be a little bit shocking, I suppose, and this may be the case for other initiates approaching the 6th degree. They may have worked out their own way of giving service only to find that the divine will indicates something else. So by recording that quality, the nature and quality of their use of the divine will, there will come a realization of what path they will choose, whether or not it is correct. In this manner, they become aware of how many senior disciples will be needed to take over the headship of an ashram, with a consequent admittance of many disciples to the initiation next in order for them. So the law of elevation is at work, and the vacancies will be filled accordingly. It's a numbers game in many respects, because number controls the effectively functioning ashrams and an effectively functioning hierarchy. At the same time, aspirants on the periphery of an ashram are unable to move forward into full ashramic participation. And so, ascension relates to more than the master who ascends. It draws up the many candidates who have another step before them, and we come back to the idea of the magnetism we studied. If I be lifted up, will draw all men unto me, and the hierarchy, when lifted up, will draw the various groups forward on their next step. So Shamballa is mathematical in a certain respect. It is estimating and can determine with great accuracy which of the seven paths a certain initiate will choose, and this will condition, because they are moving forward. It will condition the ashram. They are moving forward. Vacancies will be created. And, the senior disciples, if they can rise to the challenge, will have to step in to those roles. I'm remembering Mary Bailey used to quote this, and I can't remember where it's from, but maybe it came from her own experience, but she said that some people are born to greatness, and others have greatness thrust upon them. It may, well, I think it's a quote from, the English literature. At the same time, I'm sure she experienced some variety of that when it fell to her responsibility to be the director of the Lucis Trust after Alice Bailey passed on, and Foster Bailey took her place as the director. But then came the time when Foster Bailey no longer could do the directorship, and he passed on as well, and she was left as the full director, and perhaps that was not expected. Anyway, we all have to be ready to rise into the next sphere of responsibility so that the chain of hierarchy may be unbroken. I don't want to leave that paragraph. Well, I'll come back to it at another time. Suffice it to say, we're all being watched. We're all being tested, both as individuals and as groups. And it looks here like nothing is left to chance, and maybe certain types of special stimulation have to be given in order to help those who must rise into greater spheres of responsibility, thus to rise. All this should give you some idea of the synthesis which expresses itself through the three planetary centers, Shamballa, hierarchy, and humanity. They're not working independently of each other, and certainly from the higher perspective, they are not. These are responsible for the conditioning of the other planetary centers. Not too much is said about them, but anyway, perhaps at the end of Esoteric Psychology 1, that's sort of a appendix of tabulations, some hints can be gathered. These are responsible for the conditioning of the other planetary centers and the consequent demonstration of divine intention. So divine intention coming from Shambhala has to work through both hierarchy and humanity in a conscious way, and then through the other centers. The basic purpose of Sanat Kumara is to bring about right relations in every field of his manifested life. So if we say that right relations is the great theme of Shambhala, sometimes it's been said right human relations, but it should take on, I think, a wider meaning than that, because Sanat Kumara is demonstrating through all the different kingdoms and centers, and of course different kingdoms can be centers within his life, just the way the human kingdom is to be considered a center. Okay, the basic purpose of Sanat Kumara is to bring about right relations in every field of his manifested life. Right relations will mean, of course, conformity to archetype, and there are ever higher archetypes to which to conform. So our great exemplars, to whose archetypes, or to whose conceived archetypes we must conform, have their own exemplars, and on it goes. The encouraging factor is today that the activity of humanity itself is for the first time concerned with the entire subject of right human relations and how to bring it about. So this is in reflection of Sanat Kumara's concern for right relations in every field of his manifested life. I would have you reflect on this, for it means that, again, for the first time, humanity is consciously responding to the will and intention of Shambhala, which is, of course, right relations. This is so important. And when we talk about relations, the ray of the divine pattern, or the ray of right relationship, divine relationship is involved. When there is pattern, there is relationship, and the second ray is the ray of the divine pattern. So humanity is consciously responding to the will and intention of Shambhala, even though without realizing the esoteric implications. But among the disciples of the world, that realization has to be there. This is of far greater importance than you can imagine, for it signifies a new relationship of the spiritual nature, and with deeply spiritual results. And, this will allow, I think, the second aspect of divinity, the soul nature of our planetary logos, to emerge. And the will at this time is for the emergence of the Christ aspect, or the second divine aspect, so that it can come into control, as would be the case with any sacred planet. And we are not yet a sacred planet. We cannot be a planet whose monad emerges if the soul of our planetary logos does not emerge. So this, and it's so interesting. As I said with Mary Bailey, I did, some training under her, as a number of us did when we were working in the Lucis Trust in the 70s and 80s and so forth. And of course earlier, but we weren't there earlier, the ones I know. And I'm realizing that so many of the guiding principles which she presented to us and tried to inspire us with, came from this book, which, as I said, was her Bible, as she said. So, okay, moving on, as I just hate to move from paragraph to paragraph, because there's so much that is unchewed, But anyway, humanity for the first time is concerned with the entire subject of right human relations, and I think I should somehow, put that in highlighting. And I would have you reflect on this, for it means, again, humanity is consciously responding to the will of Shamballa. And of course, if right human relations do emerge, it will mean that humanity is working through its soul, and human beings are working through their soul with respect to other human beings. So this is a real reorientation. Here, humanity is becoming the disciple. As far as humanity is concerned, there is a reversal of the wheel. The preparation of the masters for the sixth initiation is exceedingly strenuous. I guess sometimes we think we are being subjected to much pressure, but in truth we could not stand that kind of pressure to which they are subjected. They find it is difficult to achieve their goal, as does the average disciple as he looks ahead at the initiation, which immediately confronts him. I feel like I have to almost underline every section here. Underlining is good because it impresses things upon you, and we need to be impressed by these great thoughts which have come from a master who knows something, and who is imparting to us a thought form which will change our conception of reality entirely. Anyway, they find it difficult to achieve. They struggle with it, obviously. It's not as if difficulty and strenuousness somehow ends in some sort of fatuous heaven, no more work, Once you get to heaven, that's it. Everything's just the way you want it, no more work. Well, they're rising into higher and higher heavens, and I suppose the journey to the seventh heaven is also extremely difficult. They have to master the technique of handling the most potent energy and influence in the world, that of intelligence, okay? Through their will, they master intelligence, which has been prepared as the primordial ray of our solar system and is ingrained in the personality ray of our planet, and is very difficult to overcome by the soul of our planet. It has so much conditioning, even from the power of the previous major solar system. They have to penetrate into the mystery of electricity and implement its expression in the creative process under the directive of Shamballa. Something of what they have to do in their preparation process. Penetrate into the mystery of electricity, maybe under the number 5 because they are a master. We know their penetration will be facilitated. There must be something imparted through the number 5 of the fifth initiation, which can help unveil this mystery of electricity. We know how many, just in a homely way, how many fifth-ray types are involved with electricity. Aquarius, the fifth ray, Aquarius, the sign of electricity, and the fifth ray, the ray particularly involved in the understanding of electrical phenomena. They have to learn to work with electric fire in the same way as much earlier, but notice the word learn is here, mastering, penetrating, learning, to work with electric fire in the same way as much earlier. They work with fire by friction as personalities, and with solar fire as disciples, and lesser initiates, what can we say, initiates of the threshold. Okay, that won't work. All right. In this way, they become familiarized with what is meant by the words the central spiritual sun. It means a number of things on different levels. Just as they were familiar with the appearance of the physical sun when they were members of the human family, and with the heart of the sun as members of the hierarchy. So central spiritual sun, you know, it's the monad basically in man. It's the monadic nature of the solar logos, and it's also, from an astronomical point of view, that great logos, that great one about whom naught may be said. Just as they're familiar, yes, heart of the sun as members of the hierarchy. And, you know, our objective is to learn to work with the heart of the sun, with the energy passing through our own egoic lotus and through the spiritual triad from the soul nature of our solar logos. Again, you can see the same unfolding synthesis, the coherence of things, the way they all work together towards a specific end, an end rather unknown to us, but we are assuming a glorious end. The same unfolding synthesis, the synthesis which originates in that focal point of attractive dynamic energy known to us as the sun and its planets, which is really, you know, the central spiritual sun, heart of the sun, and physical sun. It is the Lord of our solar system, the Lord of our solar system. Okay, what do I do here? Right. Okay, friends, I think that will be it for this program. This is the end of Rays and Initiations webinar commentary, program 19, pages 388 to 395, and we'll begin with program number 20. We have just a little bit more to go in this section, and then picking up a little piece on 409 where it talks about the two new paths that are available. It doesn't say much, but it mentions them. And then comes the listing of all the different paths which we have already covered. So that will be it for the moment, and we'll be going on then to program 20. Okay, see you soon. Bye-bye.